But anyway, who am I? Why am I here? So I'm a consultant at FireEye. I've got many a year in IT, 7, 8 years in InfoSec. Started off as a sysadmin, did all the really crappy jobs you don't want to do, was up really late doing all that kind of stuff. Moved into PCI DSS security. That was really awesome. Compliance drives security. Also, I've worked in all the major MSPs, Fujitsu, HPE, etc. Kind of did a lot of security engineering, you know, proxies, firewalls, blah, blah, blah. And then I moved into incident response. So I got to do incident response for the government. I actually wrote the incident response plan for the My Health record in its first version. I'm sure it's definitely been improved since. I haven't been there for a few years. So, and I currently work with FireEye. So what I do there is, you guessed it, incident response. So I'm a consultant, so I'm paid to speak words and also, you know, doing packet analysis, forensic analysis, making sure that people understand what they're actually paying for. So what are we going to talk about? Well, I'm going to talk about the common attack types. So there are a couple of common attack types out there. And then from there, we're actually going to go into how can we investigate such a thing. And from there, we're going to look at a couple of different common malware. Because malware is actually one of my interests. It's kind of what I'm into. So that's what I'm going to speak to the most, right? So, common attack methods. Malware-based attacks. So viruses, trojans, worms, etc., etc. It's all the same stuff, right? It's malicious code. All right, it's there to do evil. Whatever that objective is, who knows, you'll work it out, but it's there to do something that the system wasn't intended to do. Phishing attacks. Now, phishing attacks are super popular. Why are they super popular? Because they're really easy to do. So, like, for example, my email address is matt.dunham@fireeye.com, right? That's really easy to guess. That's like an organization's email syntax. So if you can guess their email syntax, from there, you've got a pretty nice list, thanks to LinkedIn, because everyone on LinkedIn wants to show off who they're working for, which gives you a good attack surface into one corporate environment. And you only need one click. That's all it takes. Phishing attacks work because they're low cost, easy to do, deliver results. They're going to be around for a long time. So denial of service attacks, a couple are here. That there is a screenshot of 4chan's low orbit ion cannon, group of delinquents that like to do DDoS attacks. Really easy to do, it just sends junk at a server. Get enough delinquents doing that, and you get a massive distributed denial of service attack, which can take down major sites. Point and click denial of service, really, really fun. Now the more sophisticated denial of service stuff is basically, you know, you're a malware author, you've written a real wormable exploit, callback C2, etc., and you rent out your botnet, right? And then you charge money to do the DDoS. Fantastic business model. Other things, web-based attacks. Web-based attacks are always going to be there because the web server is there to serve content, okay? So 24/7, it's going to be there. Now, you got things like input validation, you know, SQL injection, you know, broken authentication, etc., etc. This is all very well understood and tested, yet it's still a problem. So if you wanted to check that out, OWASP. OWASP is where it's at to check that one out. And I personally like to use Burp Suite when I'm doing web app penetration testing. So, man-in-the-middle attacks. That there is a simple graphical representation of a man-in-the-middle attack. Basically, the attacker sits between you and the service or server, okay? Really, really, really easy. Now, it used to be super, super easy, still kind of is. You can actually sit in a coffee shop and hijack the Wi-Fi and actually act as the router and then just wait for clients to connect, take all their connections, good to go. From there, you can usually steal usernames and passwords. Now, don't get me wrong, there's ways to mitigate that. SSL, encrypt things. Not everything encrypts things, though. Credential reuse. Love this one. So, security policy. Who has a dumb security policy? Users must change their password every 90 days. And it mustn't be the same as the last password. So what does human nature do with that? They chuck a 1 on the end. Once the 1's done, what do? They chuck a 2 on the end, etc., etc. That's how that works, right? And the reason that credential reuse is so widespread is because humans like to be lazy, okay? So an attacker is relying on that fact. So all they got to do is pick up a couple of password dumps. So haveibeenpwned.com, massive password dump repository. So if you can get the sources for that, then you suddenly have all these passwords. Chances are if you chuck a 1, a 2, or 3 at the end of those passwords, they're probably still valid somewhere. I've worked on cases before where in the information technology environment, there was credential reuse in the operational technology environment. So basically power plants and things like that. And the reason being, humans are lazy. Same credentials. Once IT was compromised, OT got compromised. Is what it is. So why is all this stuff important? Why should you actually bother to understand these things, right? Shouldn't you just buy some magical silver bullet solution and solve all your problems? No. So you want to be able to assess risk correctly. You want to be able to deploy effective defenses. And you also want to anticipate attackers' actions and likely entry points into your network. Now, that's important because if you're actually thinking with this kind of mindset, you can actually have a rational response to when you get compromised compared to an emotional one. So the kind of work that I do at FireEye every day is respond to breaches. Yeah? So that's just part of the normal for me. But when I see it in my clients, when they get hacked the first time, they're very jumpy. You know, they're having an emotional reaction to it, whereby if they actually understand the attack methodologies and how to react to them and how to mitigate them, then they'll have more of a less of an emotional response and more of a rational response. And that's really what we're going for here. So understanding the TTPs will improve your security posture and ensure you have a rational driven response. So with that in mind, let's check out some malware. So this is a really easy low-tech way to do it. So you build your own labs. Virtualization is awesome. It makes things super easy. And so you're making a little sandbox to launch malware in. Now, everything listed in the victim VM and the attack VM I'm about to go through, totally free. I've got a personal preference for VMware Fusion. You've got to pay money for that. If you don't want to pay money for that, that's cool. Use VirtualBox. Pretty much just as good. I used VirtualBox for a good 8-9 years or so before I switched to Fusion. So it absolutely works. So here's the deal though. All these samples are live. So I'm going to provide the MD5 checksum values. I'm going to show you how you can actually go download a whole lot of malware. You don't want to be that guy or girl that has done investigative research on their corporate machine and then launched a massive attack in their environment, okay? You will never live that down in your career. That will stick with you. So just keep in mind, these are all live samples. You got to treat them with respect. So the lab setup. So Windows 7 Enterprise SP1. Hang on a second, that's not free. Yeah, it is. Google Modern IE. Microsoft have released their end-of-life stuff, and Windows 7 is end-of-life, and for compatibility on browser testing issues, full-fledged operating system. Go forth and use. Chances are if your exploit works on Windows 7, it's going to work on 8, it's going to work on 10. All right? Good test environment. Now Velociraptor is really cool. So that's basically just kind of like endpoint detection and response tool over the wire. So there was a really cool talk at Sydney B-Sides just the other week regarding that. Okay, so registry shot, reg shot, that basically takes a snapshot of the registry before you launch the malware and the snapshot after, then does a compare. Because common persistence mechanisms write themselves into the registry. Procmon, process monitor. Systems internals tools, man. So that goes back to the systems administration days for me. It's just basically when you right click on the task manager and check out what's going on, you see all those little graphs. It gives you a far better idea if you actually install the sysinternal suite, and it's free from Microsoft. Now, FakeNet. FakeNet's a really cool one. That was written up by the leads of our Flare team, so that's FireEye Labs Advanced Reverse Engineering. These are the guys and girls that do assembly all day. Basically what they made here was a binary that will act as a network router, and it will basically intercept all the traffic. So if malware tries to talk out, it will go, yep, cool. It'll record all of that, write that to PCAP for you so you can analyze it later. To analyze PCAP, I use Wireshark. Oh, and Memorize is also another free FireEye tool that basically allows you to analyze live memory. So really, really cool stuff. All this stuff is free. So the attack VM. So Kali Linux for the attack VM. I mean, why would you use anything else? Fantastic. It's pretty much it is the gold standard for penetration testers. If you do penetration testing, you use Kali, and it's free. Now, me personally, I use Windows 8.1 for an analysis VM. That's just like a personal historical reasons. Just haven't switched to 10. You can use whatever you want. But basically what I have on there is I'm running Velociraptor server, and I'm also running Redline. So Redline allows me to basically pivot through different registry artifacts, check out running services, etc., etc. Another free FireEye tool. Can you tell I work for FireEye? Now, if you want malware, take a picture of that. That link there, that GitHub, is basically all the decent malware in the last 10 years. All right? And it's all good to go. You execute any of that stuff, it's going to work. Really, really cool. So yeah, treat that link with respect, but you can find a lot of cool stuff there, right? So let's talk about a simple one. Yeah, got the shot. HoudiniRAT. So this is just a remote administration tool. We see it a whole lot. Why do we see it a whole lot? Because it just works. So it's a Visual Basic script-based rat written by an individual named Houdini, original. So we believe the author's based in Algeria and has connections to the NJ-RAT author. So through means of a common or shared code base. Could be the same person, who knows. So the HWorm payload is simply a Visual Basic script file, and it's often wrapped in a PE executable dropper. So the HWorm VBS file is also packed with multiple layers of obfuscation. Basically just base64 encoded 3 times. Really original. So, as I was mentioning before, it's usually coupled with a legitimate binary. In this case, it's CCCleaner Professional Setup Wizard. Awesome. So this is basically pirated software that I obtained, through that GitHub. And, pirated software, CCCleaner, it's going to make my computer faster. It's going to be awesome. It's free software, and I'll save myself $35, right? Nah. 5 seconds after the thing's installed, it starts beaconing back to its command and control server. That's not good, right? So what exactly happened? Because this is the actual network traffic that you can see here once the install completes. So what's occurring is that during the installation, 25 registry keys were added and 250 values were added. Now keep in mind, this is for a legitimate binary. Most of that was for CCCleaner. All right, cool, no problem. But the interesting part was the persistence mechanism for the rat was added into the registry. And you can see that here. So Microsoft Windows, current version, run, etc., etc. Wscript, and then launch that server VBS file. Now, me being a really sophisticated user, I launched all my malware from the desktop. So you're probably going to see a lot of paths that are pointing back to the desktop or use a temporary directory. But that is what it is. And for good measure also, it's also placed in the startup server VBS. So here's the deal, right? We know that server VBS is responsible for this stuff. And I've also got the process IDs to prove it. Now, who knows what a process ID is? Got a couple of nods. Yep, cool, cool. Well, just so you know, here is the official Wikipedia entry that can explain it far better than I can. In computing, process identifier is a number used by most operating system kernels, such as those of Unix, Mac OS, and Microsoft Windows, to uniquely identify an active process. Thing with malware, it's going to use legitimate system processes to launch the malware. So when you look at the parent process, that's all legit. When you look at the child process, that might be malicious, but you won't know till you start to investigate. So we understand where the server VBS file is, and we can see it there. There was I glossed over it, there was a screenshot. That's just part of it. Triple base64 encoded, really secure. So we could do one or two things. We could analyze that code, we could decode it, see how it works. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's already been done, so we're not going to do that. Instead, what we're going to do is look at what server VBS does, fire its process ID on the system. So what it does, it creates a PID and puts itself into memory. And from there, it runs numerous checks about what it can and cannot access, and it gathers the host information from the registry. So it reads it from these paths. It's picking things up like host name, domain, that kind of stuff, operating system version, etc., etc. Then what server VBS will do is create a child process of Wscript.XE to do its bidding. Now what Wscript XE does is it takes all the host information, that its parent process obtained and invokes the following legit DLLs to do outbound communication. So TCP stack, NTDLL, WinNT, etc., all legit stuff, not malware. All right, but this is an example of malware using legitimate system processes to do evil. And then what it does, it sends out these modules. A HTTP post is sent out to the RAT's command and control server. And so this is what's sent in clear text via the HTTP post. So with the HTTP post, all that is just communication outbound to a server. So when you're interacting with a web server, you're doing gets and posts. So your computer is just simply sending something out. And with HoudiniRAT, what it does, it actually sends out the host name, username, date it was infected, is it running any antivirus, etc., etc. So that's all contained in the user agent field. So there's not inherently malicious traffic there. It's more just a fingerprint. And you're only going to see that stuff if you're actually watching the network. And it will continue to beacon out and wait for additional instructions from the command and control server. Oh, and for those curious, the pirated program did work. So my computer was definitely faster as a result. All right, let's talk about one of my favorite of the last couple of years, WannaCry. So I was working for FireEye about the middle point of WannaCry, and then working for the government at the start of it. It was all very interesting, but basically WannaCry leveraged the Eternal Blue SMB vulnerability that's described in that security bulletin. So the thing with Eternal Blue, it's an exploit, right? And that was identified in April 2017 in a publicly available exploit dump by the Shadow Brokers group. Now Eternal Blue takes advantage of a vulnerability in the server message block version 1 protocol on Windows systems. If you want to check that out, the link is right there. We'll talk more about that exploit in a minute, right? But that is literally what powered WannaCry. So what did WannaCry do? Has anyone ever accidentally infected a machine with WannaCry? No? Okay. Okay. Because I actually intentionally did it for the first time just the other month, because I've just seen so many screenshots of that. I was like, I want to get me my own screenshot. So I did. So I downloaded this from the malware repository. Now, 10 seconds after the execution of the binary, the following pop-up appears. So every single file on the host has been encrypted, and it has the WannaCry extension. So the clock is ticking, right? You got 3 days, pay $300, 6 days, $600. If you wait any longer than 7 days, you lose all your files. So what does it do? Well, each directory will have the following files: a pleasereadme.txt and the WannaDecryptor.exe. So the decryptor is the decryptor program that, should you pay the ransom, you'll be given a key to copy and paste in there, and it'll all go away, that problem. The curious thing about WannaCry is that this was a business model. That WannaCry, that pleasereadme.txt file is actually there in English. If my operating system was running a different language, they have their own text files of that too, incorporated in their malware binary. They want to make sure that you understand what's happened, so you can go and transfer money to that Bitcoin wallet address. Now the CPU is totally maxed out, and it's making the response time on the host slow. But there's the actual contents of the please read me file there. So WannaCry's firmly established itself into the host system. It's created 19 registry entries, added 40 and modified 43. There's the persistence mechanisms for WannaCry. If you just search a registry for WannaCryptor and it actually comes up, that machine at some point in its life got compromised by WannaCry. So what it does, it's running the task sche.exe right from the desktop every time on boot. Now, when it loads itself into memory, it starts to scan the file system and leave the decryption instructions in each directory. And it's looking for specific file types. So, you know, JPEG, XLS, Word docs, PowerPoint presentations, etc., etc. And what it will do a couple of things. It's going to use legitimate system operations, so query standard information file. So it's going to check out what file extension this is, what file type it is. And if it meets the criteria, it's going to read the file, and then it's going to create the file. When it creates the file, it's going to encrypt it with that key that's loaded into the malware's memory. So during the create file operation, it uses the legit Windows crypto modules to encrypt the file on the host. Another example of legitimate things doing evil, Now I'll keep repeating this process until the host is shut down or the decryption key is inserted into the program. And once that's done, once it's all done locally on the system, it's then going to pivot to SMB, so file shares, on the network, and then attempt to encrypt those. Because most users to file shares in corporate environments have read-write access. This is what happens with WannaCry, right? This is why it was so successful. And once it's finally done with all of that, it'll then fire off the SMB vulnerability Eternal Blue to spread to other hosts on the internet. So we'll check out that vulnerability in just a minute. Now the first versions of WannaCry had a hard-coded kill switch domain in them. Those are the domains. So if WannaCry could connect to those domains on install, it wouldn't encrypt any of the files. We just looked at a version where that limitation was removed, okay? So it's never going to make that check. It's just going to encrypt all the things. But I got to say, it was really successful. So we mentioned previous talk about one of the people dying at hospital because the life support systems failed. Well, the British NHS, so the National Healthcare Service, numerous hospitals in Britain had to revert back to paper records because they couldn't use their compute systems. So that would have been a bit of a bitch because doctors' handwriting, not very good at all. But then we also had different ISPs. So the ones that are known, Telefonica Mexico, Megaphone, which is a Russian telco, FedEx got hit, Renault got hit, etc., etc. There was recently a story, what was it? A massive shipping company. The CISO had her first day. On the second day, she had a WannaCry outbreak in the OT environment. Not fun. But yeah, WannaCry was prolific. It was just one of those things. And it was powered by this exploit. So the exploit was developed by the US NSA according to the testimony of former NSA employees and was in use for 5 years before it was publicly known. My source is the Washington Post. This is all verifiable information. You can go check that out yourself. The exploit was leaked by the Shadow Brokers group on the 14th of April 2017, and then the exploit was used by WannaCry on the 12th of May 2017. Less than 3 weeks to package that thing up and push it out. Not a bad turnaround time, right? You ever launched a product that quickly? The vulnerability exists because SMB v1 mishandles specially crafted packets from remote attackers, which allows the attacker to execute code. If you want to read the finer technical points, there's a CVE for you. But here's the real fun part. Who's ever used Metasploit before? Yeah? Okay. For those that are unaware, Metasploit is a fantastic application where you can launch exploits and send payloads to hosts and attack them. So it's really, really easy to use, right? Well, they made a Metasploit module for this. So now anyone can hack like the NSA from 10 years ago. Now, curiously, does anyone know how long this exploit was rumored to be available at the NSA before it was dropped in 2017? Does anyone know? No, that's the protocol. I'm talking about the vulnerability for this particular protocol.
When did the vulnerability actually get put in the code?
It's not a matter of that. The NSA.
I would have said it was the same moment.
I like it. No, basically, another on public record, a former NSA employee said that they had it in use for 5 years prior. This is really easy to use, as you're about to see. So first we load up Metasploit on our Kali Attack Linux VM. We select the Eternal Blue exploit, and then we input our target's IP address, remote port to talk over, and the payload to deliver to the target. Because we're just doing a simple example, I'm going to use the interpreter shell. So that just basically loads a remote shell onto the host for me in memory, and I can do whatever the hell I want with it. Then we run our exploit, because we're hacking like pros here, right? Now the thing with this exploit, what's really curious with it, is that it will send 12 SMB packets, all right? And it's going to, if I recall correctly, it's on the 9th or 10th that it actually kicks the service over and then does remote code execution. And you can see that there in the screenshot. So writing network signatures for this, it's a very well understood problem, okay? It's not all doom and gloom. But for the attacker side, this is pretty damn easy. So once it successfully works, maybe we want some password hashes to crack offline now. That's easy. We just run hash dump on Metasploit. Done. Or maybe for a laugh, we want to use our Windows command shell on our Linux system. That's pretty cool. So just run the ipconfig command. But basically, I can load anything I want on this system now, do anything I want with it. I've got the hash dump, which means I've got all the passwords. It's ripped those passwords out of memory. All I need to do is basically crack them offline. Good to go. So what does this look like forensically? Well, no compelling evidence for the registry. So me as an attacker, I was lazy. I didn't set any persistence mechanism for my shell. Therefore, the shell was just loaded directly into memory. So there was nothing in current version run, for example, which is a common persistence mechanism directory. So the exploit performs the attack in live memory, so far-right events will be limited and temporary. That's okay. We can see network traffic. There's what we see. We have the network traffic for the initial packets for the exploit, and then we have the interpreter reverse TCP shell being set up. So we've got evidence here. Actionable evidence. Now we can see here that it's talking back of a very original port, 4321. Now, when the exploit was run against the victim, Services XE helpfully stepped in to handle the requests over SMB and created a PID for itself of 448. It then, so Services XE is a service control manager. It's there to help. It's going to make sure that your system can interact with other systems. It's going to make sure that everything works. It's all good. This particular, the giveaway with this particular PID was running the exploit instructions was because it spawned a child process for the interpreter shell. So it creates a child's process called spoolsv.exe with a PID of 1108. And we can see that the child process is busy talking to the attacker VM. So the output of the hash dump command right there. And basically what it is, it's using the Kernel.exe to rip the password hashes out of the memory. So that's NTO skrnl.exe is the Windows NT operating system kernel. All right, this is just one of the features of interpreter, but it's using legitimate system calls to do evil stuff. So, you know, I've gone through a couple of basic attacks, right? Kind of glossed over them, to be fair. But I hope you get an appreciation that attacks are not a black art. They're a well-understood process, with each exploit having numerous well-written breakdowns by professionals. Now, there's many tools available to increase your understanding. And some are free, some aren't. But the point here is to increase your understanding. Because I'd like to get to the ivory tower one day of moving away from compliance checkbox ticking exercises to actually solid security basics. So the ASD Essential 8. If every single Australian company implemented the ASD Essential 8, we wouldn't have much of a cybersecurity problem. There'd still be problems for sure, but the attack surface would be drastically reduced. So going back to security basics, I think is super important. So once you have the appreciation of how these attacks work, instead of having an emotional driven response the next time your organization gets hacked, you can actually have a rational driven response and respond to it effectively. But anyway, thank you very much for your time. Should you want to chat, I'll be around having a beer and what have you. Thank you.